Today, here's what we're going to do. So I wanted to know where you guys got with that first drill, which was a very simplistic version of it. And today we're going to expand on that to make sure that everybody understands how to produce power and consistency. Because the one thing that we noticed, and Craig and I talked yesterday, was that so many golfers were really struggling with how to load the arms and the body in the last session. And so we went back and looked at that and now are going to expand on how to do that, because basically there's not necessarily a wrong or right way to do it, but there is a simpler way to do it. And so I was kind of giving you guys free rein to do it your own way. And now we're going to give you a much more focused and specific way of how to do it. And we're going to talk about that today. I talked about how the right shoulder or the trail shoulder can move the right arm. But I've had this theory for many, many years, and I've been slow to really talk about it in depth. Come on, focus, camera, focus. There you go. So, but today I'm going to share it with you guys. As you know, I have studied Tiger Woods' swing forever. And the reason is it just is so simple. Of course, nobody's able to do it, so it apparently can't be that simple, right? But I truly believe that it is. And I've had a theory as to what it is that he's doing for a long, long time. And that's what we're going to go over today. Because the swing mechanics, and we're going to walk through a bunch of different stuff, but the swing mechanics of what he's doing are truly efficient. They're truly effortless. And especially as he's swinging now today, not today, before he had his ankle surgery, he moved so smoothly and well that it was very, very safe on the body, but produced perfect amount of power and control and consistency. And he's always had that, but he's always swung pretty much the same way to a degree in terms of producing power. And that's really what it comes down to. So the things that you guys were describing as far as feeling stuck or not knowing how to do this or that, today I'm going to give you a simpler way to think about it, but I have to explain a couple of things first. So in its simplest form, when you think about how to produce power in the swing, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And the GOATs, as I've studied over the years, they kind of all did certain things very similar, but they all described the swing in a very specific way that is very different. In fact, completely contradictory to what I'm going to tell you I believe Tiger's doing in his swing. And I'm going to show you why it is this way in just a moment. But in its simplest way of thinking about it, if you think about that right shoulder, your trail shoulder, as kind of the primary mover in the swing. So for those of you who've been around for a long time, the RST days of the old right shoulder blade glide drill, that became a very sensational video that I put out there years ago. It's had millions of views, but it also kind of became the bane of our existence because people didn't quite know how to do it correctly. And so once you understand this supination of the arm and you put that together with this right shoulder blade or this right shoulder moving, it starts to all kind of fall into place to give you one thing to focus on. So if I focus on just my right shoulder, my trail shoulder, pulling it back during the backswing, I start loading up my body in a very specific way. But one of the things that's always been difficult to really understand is we have hundreds of muscles in the body. Which ones do we use? You've heard the swing starts from the ground up. You should use your feet. You should use your core. You should use your arms. You should use your wrists. And all of these things can work, but Tiger's always made it so simple and so efficient. And what I truly believe that he's doing is focusing is perhaps not the right word, but he's primarily moving this trail shoulder back and through, and that's the primary mover in his golf swing. Now, how does just moving this shoulder do anything in the golf swing? Well, if you think about the golf swing in terms of muscles, it's kind of hard to think about it because how would just moving this trail shoulder back do anything? How would I load any muscles? How would it do anything to give me any speed? But so I've got a bungee cord here basically, and I'm going to explain those handouts in just a moment. So I'm just going to put this underneath my lead foot, and then I'm going to wrap this up. Imagine this is kind of wrapping up around my body, and it was attached to my right shoulder. Now, as I pull this trail shoulder back, what's going to happen to this band? Well, obviously, it's going to be stretched, right? So if I pull this trail shoulder back as far as I can, and this leg stays more or less anchored in. I don't want it buckling in. If I do this, this band then wants to snap back. But now there's no muscle in my body that goes from my left big toe to my right shoulder, right? That's where fascia comes in. Now, how many of you are familiar with the term fascia? Have you guys heard that before? Or anybody familiar with what fascia is in the body? Talmadge has, okay. So for those of you that haven't, when we think about the muscles and how they work in the golf swing, you've heard that the golf swing should kind of feel like a rubber band. You stretch it and then it pulls back. And Hogan talked about that in his book. But it's not really the muscles. And it's only been in the last 10, 15 years that fascia has begun to be understood how it works in sports and athletic movement. Fascia is in every single part of your body. It covers every muscle fiber, every muscle. It's actually like a layer of saran wrap on the outside of the muscles. It's actually inside the muscles. It covers your ligaments, your tendons, your nerves. Every organ in your body is covered in fascia. But back in the old days when we used to do cadaver dissections, they just kind of threw the fascia away and went and looked right at the muscles. But now there's a totally different field of study that's helping people understand how fascia is actually what you're wanting to understand how to stretch in the body, because it's actually the fascia that's actually rebounding and giving you that stretch shortening cycle. So for those of you who don't know what that is, I've talked about it a bunch on the website, but basically the stretch shortening cycle is that it's always been thought of as the muscles, but it's really more of the fascia. When you start to lengthen a muscle, it just for a moment, it holds this energy where it wants to rebound back. And the faster you stretch it, the faster it wants to rebound back. What you're doing in the golf swing is exactly that. You're stretching a muscle very quickly, and then you're wanting it to fire very quickly. And that's where you start really getting effortless power, because if you don't stretch these muscles and let them use your own body to let it rebound naturally, that's where you start having to put a lot of muscular effort into it. But when you stretch the fascia and let it snap you back, there's very little muscular effort involved in the golf swing. And that's what I've always been fascinated with on swings like Tiger and Bobby Jones, who look like they're really not working very hard at all. But what are they doing? They have to be doing something. Well, I believe it's the fascia, and that's what we're going to focus on to help you understand how to move your body in a very, very simplistic way. But again, if I just told you to move this trail shoulder back, and you're still pushing from the lead side, this knee buckling in, your shoulder coming across your body, you're no longer stretching the fascia. So now if you look at one of your handouts, I want you to look at the first one that looks like this. So this is a documented spiral fascial line in the body. And what you'll see here is that it actually, and there are many fascial lines, and I'll talk more about what this is in just a moment. But this blue line that you're seeing is a connected, basically, piece of fascia that goes throughout the entire body, and it literally spirals across the core, around through the internal part of the body in the chest and rib cavity, and then back around to the back. And it goes all the way up to the top of your head. And if you've ever been to a cadaver event where you can go and see bodies on display that have had the flesh, the skin removed and what have you, you can actually watch them pull the fascia from like the base of the skull, and it'll move the heel, or vice versa. You move the heel, or the one, there's actually another one that goes all the way to the big toe, and it'll pull the skull. The skull will move by moving the fascia without moving any of the muscles. And so when you start to think about how to use this powerful feature of the body that we don't really think about, because it's not a muscle, it's this fascial lines that are running throughout the body. And if you look at the other slide that I gave you, this is a representation of some of the documented fascial lines throughout the whole body. And you'll see, again, to explain what the fascial lines are, your body has fascia everywhere, but there are certain areas of concentrated fascia where they like form a long piece throughout the whole body. So you can see, for example, this blue line here that goes up from the heel up through the back of the calf, back of the leg, and into the glute and hip area, and then up through the spine. That's one thick area of fascia. So if you stretch that, and it will naturally want to rebound very quickly. Same thing, you actually have fascia going all the way down through the fingers, from the fingertips all the way up through the shoulder to the base of the neck, the base of the skull, all the way into the middle thoracic. there are different fascial lines throughout the whole body. And so when you think about the golf swing in terms of fascia instead of muscles, then you start to realize that the way that you can move the body doesn't necessarily need to think about it in terms of, okay, I need to move this muscle, I need to fire this muscle and then fire this muscle. You think about it in terms of stretching fascia from the tip of your toe all the way to your shoulder, and that naturally wants to rebound. And that's where you're going to get that effortless power. So again, if I pull this rubber band back up here, and I know that I have a fascial line starting all the way at the tip of my toe, going up through my body and up to my right shoulder, this is what I'm trying to do. So if you happen to have, this is just a typical little surgical rubber athletic band, but this will give you a great feeling because you can feel immediately when you pull one of these up to your body and up to your shoulder that there's tension on here already. And when I stretch this, it automatically wants to go back down. So for those of you that are feeling that you're not really sure how to move, how to produce power, what do I fire? Does this give you a better visual of pulling the shoulder back and keeping this leg anchored in? And you should be able to stand up and feel this right now without having to swing a golf club. So just imagine your left foot, just a picture in your mind, a stretch of elastic body that literally runs from the tip of your big toe through your calf, up through your body, through your core, into your internal organs, and all the way up to that trail shoulder. And if you pull that trail shoulder back as far as you can, do you feel that stretching? When you start thinking about it this way, and yes, you're all going to feel kind of, as you get a feel for this, right now, you're going to feel that that leg might need to be more anchored to the ground so that you can stretch it. But you should feel this. Now, take that left leg and let it buckle in, and what changes? Because that's what's happening all the time, because what we see more often than not is golfers don't know what to kind of move to kind of get the swing started. So instead of using this trail shoulder to initiate everything and get that fascial line stretched, they start doing this. And this is what we saw last week. A ton of lead arm push, rolling across. If you have the club going inside, this is exactly what you're doing. You're taking this lead arm to push the club across your body because it's in a powerful position to do so. So it feels natural to do that. But if you start taking the club back inside, you're stretching all the wrong parts of the body at the wrong time. And now all of a sudden, you don't have anything to fire in the right sequence. You have to then start trying to manipulate things. But when you keep this arm straight and you take that trail shoulder to move that straight arm, so my arm's not really doing anything at this point. So if I put a club in my hands during the takeaway, my arm's just staying straight, supinated out. But now from here, all of this from my right shoulder diagonally across my body to my big toe, everything just wants to be able to fire back down. And that's the simplest way to put the entire swing together, is thinking about it in this diagonal stretching pattern. So if you look at my body here, like the club going from my foot to my right shoulder, the further I get this trail shoulder back, the more stretch I get. The more stretch I get in that fascia, and the faster I do it, the less the rest of my body has to do. I don't have to fire hard with my arms, push with my right leg, or any of that stuff. Instead, what you start thinking about is, how do I create torque in the golf swing? And that's another thing that this is going to help you start to feel. Because what a lot of times golfers do, and a lot of great golfers tell you to do the opposite. Like Gary Player, for example, he loved the idea of taking a step and walking through, the old Gary Player walkthrough. If you do that, you're literally doing the opposite of what Tiger's doing, because you're not stretching that fascial line. You're having to push hard off the right leg to try and move the club forward. You never see Tiger stepping forward, or really any modern great players, because power is so important in the swing. And so they're much more compact. And what they're doing is stretching these fascial lines and then creating a lot of rotational force and torque from this trail shoulder. So once you have this trail shoulder stretched, or this whole body stretched with the trail shoulder, so I'm trying to move my trail shoulder as far away from my left big toe as I can get it, what's going to happen to that side bend? Well, you're going to have side bend naturally. So I don't have to think about tilting my left shoulder down. If I pull my right shoulder as far away from my left big toe as I can, I'm entering side bend. So if you look at it from this view, I naturally have side bend. And so it looks like my shoulders are kind of tilting this way. But what I'm really doing is trying to stretch that fascial line. Does that make sense so far?